Right, yeah, well, I haven't gone anywhere. I'm straight back here in part 2. Continuing on where this dipshit is trying to describe an Earth constantly accelerating upwards at 9.8 metres per second squared, which in itself is ridiculously wrong because we know for a fact that even falling objects reach a point called terminal velocity, which means that they will reach a certain speed before it becomes terminal. So nothing is constantly accelerating. All we're seeing is things accelerating to a point because they're falling through a density of air. Now, fair enough, air itself gets thinner and thinner as we go up, just the same as if we go down in the ocean, the pressure of the water increases as well because there's more and more water pressing down on us. Air isn't that far removed, it's quite a bit, but not that far removed from the same properties of anything that applies to density and buoyancy. So it means that at sea level, air will be at its thickest maximum capacity, which is generally quite pleasant for most of us, a quite livable situation. And if we go too high up, there won't be sufficient oxygen, and obviously we won't cope so well. Back in the day, however, when the world was full of giant trees, we may have been able to live thousands of feet in the air quite comfortably because the massive trees themselves produce oxygen. The world would have been a much richer place back then, but I'm getting off topic. Let's listen to more of these globetards trying to ask questions that they think flat earthers can't answer. That's what the title says. We can't answer. I've answered every single one and in fact shown most of them be completely ridiculous. Halfway through, let's go to the other half.
So as to not either crash into the earth or fly away forever, but why can't we observe that in any way? Why did
Oh, we got an ad. Okay, well, yeah, why can't we observe that in any way? Because it doesn't happen. Earth, as I keep saying, is flat and stationary. So why would you observe something which doesn't exist? For the same reason you cannot observe curvature. You cannot observe water curving around a ball. Planes never have to adjust for the speeding ball beneath them as they're trying to take off land and do all their flying maneuvers. You don't see what doesn't exist. So if it doesn't exist, yeah, you can make up excuses and say, well, the ground is spinning at 1,040 miles an hour, but the atmosphere is moving with it. Even though gentle breezes are going all different directions every way. Just ignore that because,
Hi, I'm Captain Arnold Brooks, retired firefighter.
Yeah, back to retirement.
Why do the stars and constellations we see in the southern hemisphere differ from those we see in the northern hemisphere?
Oh, God. Why do the clouds I see looking out my window differ from the clouds you see out your window? Distance and location. The further you travel, the more things will change and you'll see different things. Earth is still bloody big, okay? You're not going to see the same stars because they are so close and local, but still possibly hundreds, if not thousands of miles away, not hundreds of billions and billions and billions of light years, but I would say, at a rough guess, at least 1,000 miles away. I could be wrong, but maybe if it's more. If you travel to any location, does the mountain you see in the distance still look the same? Or has it changed as well? Why the hell wouldn't the stars? Because you're in a different location, you dumb broad.
When someone defends the concept of the flat earth, I've often heard the argument being made that I trust my own eyes. But we know that our eyes can deceive us.
Oh, hang on. So a second ago, the last broad was saying, why are we seeing different stars? Now the next one is saying, yeah, but we know our eyes can deceive us. Now, to even put those two questions back to each other just shows how fucking stupid you globeheads really are. To say on the one hand, visual evidence is proof we're on a globe. How can we trust our eyes? Makes sense to me.
If they couldn't, magicians and illusionists wouldn't have careers. In fact, everything that we do perceive visually comes into our eyes upside down, backwards, and full of holes. It's our brains that do the hard work of constructing that into what we would call vision. Why would you rely on something as fallible and subjective as visual perception and reject more precise and reliable forms of measurement to make your argument?
Precise and reliable measurement, which is neither precise, has never been measured, but is assumed it must exist in order for the globe to work. Now, we've already said we can't see curvature, but of course, why would we trust our eyes? Why do we see different stars? Oh, but we can't trust our eyes. So you globetards contradict yourselves constantly, thinking that if you keep glossing over enough bullshit, you can be comfortably resting assured in your beliefs of the spinning ball, where you admit visual evidence is insufficient. You claim visual evidence is the proof. And you say, well, we can't trust our other senses either because we can't detect motion. But we must believe because somebody told us. Somebody told us. Must be true.
The Soviet Union and the US were enemies during the Cold War, and we both had space programs. If one side claims the Earth was round and they were wrong, why wouldn't the other expose that?
If the sun and
Okay, so that's question number 15. Why would two countries working together to fool the world that they're in a Cold War? Who ever heard of a Cold War? I mean, seriously? What's that? The opposite of a hot war? What's a hot war where you're actually actively throwing bombs at each other? Or a Cold War? All wars are bankers' wars. That's one thing I think anybody can agree on if they've got even the slightest inkling of the truth of what is going on this plane. And you know that each side is full of deception. The whole idea of propaganda during wartime is to try and fool one another. And the greatest wars have usually been won by something as simple as sending out a fleet of inflatable fucking tanks and boats and shit and fooling the enemy into surrendering before they get blown up because it looks as though they're going to be annihilated. I mean, anything to do with war is basically trickery propaganda. And even the bloody Talmud itself, what is it called? The Zion Protocols will say, by way of deceit we shall do war. Everything is a lie. Everything. So to think for 1 second that Cold War propaganda is somehow evidence for your spinning ball because the other side didn't come up. I mean, did you go to Russia and talk to Russians? Did you interview the Russian presidents of the time? Did you talk to any of their space agencies? Or are you just assuming they stayed silent because they just wanted to be in on the conspiracy to help your government out? None of it makes sense to assume that the whole world is in on a conspiracy when they're all fed the same lies that we were fed from childhood, and they've had no reason to question it, no ability to question it, and you go along to get along. If you're in an official position and you dare question, I mean, just look at an ordinary engineer, for fuck's sake, who works all this shit out for himself. He goes through living hell, nearly loses his job or whatever, because he dares to speak up against it. What hope have you got if you're a top scientist and you speak up against it? You want your career to be shattered? You want to disappear down a ditch, having committed suicide by shooting yourself 21 times in the back? That's what happens if you dare stand up to the powers that be. So to think a few amateur flat earthers have all the answers when all the top scientists have been cajoled into this their whole entire lives, and you know, the mind boggles at what you think people are actually doing if it's a conspiracy. I mean, it absolutely boggles. You think all these thousands of people are in on it? Not one of them actually gives a shit about their career. Oh no, they just want to speak up and tell the truth. They haven't got a hope in hell. They believe what they're told. They're top scientists at it because their education tells them they're living on a globe. Of course they're going to believe it. Of course they're going to work out everything that fits perfectly with it, even if they never actually have to take any of it into account, like to build a bridge. No curvature ever gets taken into account, but let's ignore that.
Moon aren't dropping below the horizon, but just getting further away. Then why don't they all get tiny just before night, and why aren't they absolutely gigantic when they're right overhead?
Oh, okay. So another sun and moon, why it doesn't get big and small. Well, here's another thing for you. If you ever watch, say, a hot air balloon, they're a really good example because you can see them, they move quite slowly. And if you are driving along, you can actually watch how a hot air balloon, you can use clouds as well if you don't happen to see a hot air balloon, but I like that one because it's nice and colourful. You can see how objects like trees, buildings, mountains, whatever that come before them will obscure the balloon bottom first, quite readily, quite rapidly, without any shrinkage of the balloon, simply because objects coming in front, much nearer to you, will obscure things much distant in the heights, much higher than us, rather rapidly. Now, the higher something is, look at this. I like this for a good example. This corner here, see that corner? Look at the angles of those bloody things. There's a beam going up there. That's called a beam. All those lines are parallel lines. This one here, ooh, I can't do backward images. Going that way. I hold a flat level object. Here's a book. A pad. Flat, okay? You can agree that's flat. I'm not making this shit up. Look at that. If I hold that parallel, does that look parallel to you? Parallel is generally about like that with the top of your screen. But look at those parallel lines. Look at the angles they make. Now, can you imagine they're more than just 6 foot up or 8 foot up in the air, but actually like 1,000 foot or 8,000 foot or 80,000 foot in the air? The line is going to be more like this. And that is how parallel lines will go at great heights and disappear behind something near and far to you much faster. That is why the sun and moon appear to set so rapidly. This is just an 8 foot tall ceiling you're looking at here. Look at that line. Look how much greater the angle of that one is. Only because it's 5 foot closer. 100,000 foot, the line is going to be practically like this, and it's only wonder that the sun doesn't set even faster than it does, which shows it's probably not all that far away at all, because parallel lines will take greater and greater lines of convergence to meet behind that vanishing point, which is near and close to you.
Most astronauts were Christians, including the Apollo 8 astronauts who read from the book of Genesis while orbiting the moon, and Buzz Aldrin, who took communion before setting foot on the moon. If the round Earth is a satanic conspiracy, why aren't these Christian astronauts exposing it?
Took communion before going onto the moon? What, he took his fucking helmet off? How did he breathe in that vacuum? Oh, that's right, he was inside this sealed, locked capsule full of air that they would have lost all of as soon as they unsealed, unlocked it. How much air did those frickin' astronauts take to the moon anyway? I know that you need 2 big scuba tanks for the average diver to last underwater for 1 hour. These guys took 3 days there and back, each 6 days, plus spent anywhere upwards of 9 to 15 hours at a time on the moon, breathing in a tiny little cylinder of oxygen that goes through a scrubber. Meanwhile, what's the guy in the command module doing again? Oh, he's just, we had air scrubbers everywhere, these things that only cost multi-millions of dollars and heaps of payload. To believe they could even go there with that amount of air and then talk about having having a piece of bread before jumping out onto the moon because they're Christians. We all know what Christians really means. That means Luciferians, not true Christians, not true people who believe in the Christ, but people who follow the Vatican, the true Luciferian. Oh, what's the greatest telescope in the world called again? Oh, Lucifer. Oh, we better change that name then, but even though it was called Lucifer, Now we call it something different, so it's no longer fucking great deceivers everywhere. Sorry, I should have been listening to the next question. Let's listen to this fat retard.
So yet, if it's a satanic conspiracy, why is it that the discoveries about the true nature of our planet and its place in the cosmos made by Nicholas Copernicus, Galileo, Hubble and Newton were all by devoutly religious Christians?
Oh, there we go, isn't it? Devoutly religious Christians. So I just explained how it's all a Luciferian conspiracy, for want of a better word. The sun is Lucifer. I've been saying this all along. All Christianity is about sun worship. That's why you celebrate the birth of the Son of God on the 25th of December, because that is 3 days after it dies on the Southern Cross, and after 3 days it rises again. Where does the sun go on December 22nd? The most southernmost down point. Down is where hell is. So it sets in hell for 3 days, and after 3 days, according to the scriptures, it rises again. So anybody who is a devout Christian, when it comes to these organised Christians, not you brainwashed normal plebs who are just working slaves, I'm talking about the ones in control of it all, it's all Luciferian worship.
According to your model, is the moon a disk, an ethereal light, a projection, or a hologram? And in half of all flat earth models, you have Australia all scrunched and wider than North America.
That's
How
two
come
questions.
flat earthers can't seem to agree on one model?
That's two questions, okay. The first one was the moon. And I'll grant you, I don't think anybody of us know what the moon is. My latest thoughts, after serious consideration of a range of things, like the Grand Canyon looking like a strip mine thing, the way the moon itself looks as though the meteor strikes on it, nearly all facing Earth, mind you, look like perfect concentric rings, just like, say, a mud bubble would pop, making a more or less perfect circle. I would think that the moon is actually an artificial satellite created quite rapidly as the giants were receding after cutting down all our trees, mined the minerals to create this object that filled with helium somehow. I don't know how exactly. Maybe they've got engines on it constantly sucking helium out of the atmosphere to keep it pumped up, or it's somehow able to do it itself chemically, or they just filled it up and sealed it, and it's sitting up there and it goes around us 50 minutes slower than the sun each day, which is why we get the phases, because it is illuminated by the sun, but it's not a real tangible, oh no, well, I won't say not real tangible physical object. I'd say it actually resembles one very much. It's not a hologram. As much as I can tell, I've looked and studied and thought about the star that's always near it being the projector, making it the hologram. And as far as I can see, it makes logical, perfect sense that all the phases are caused by its relationship to the sun as it goes around in a monthly cycle, slightly longer than it takes the sun to go around each day. So, for one thing, no, I don't say for a second it's a hologram or it's flat. I say anything that you look up at, like the ceiling here, for example, you're only ever going to see the bottom of it, and that's why you're seeing the same face. It doesn't matter if it's all the way over there. I mean, look at that beam, for example. You're still seeing the same amount of flat bottomness of it. How much more so if it's thousands and thousands of feet in the air? Will you only ever be seeing the bottom of it, regardless of where you are? Now, this one about Australia looking like it's squashed. Come on, tell me. Even as an Australian, which I have been all my life, I'm an 8th generation one side of the family, 9th generation Australian on the other side of the family. I'm an Australian through and through. I love my country. I think it's freaking brilliant. It's one of the better ones, thank goodness, because it's had possibly the least amount of influence over the centuries from you frickin' hungry, greedy, aggressive, warmongering Northern Hemispherians, even though you fucked this country pretty badly and killed 99% of the natives who were living in an absolute paradise before you came along and fucked it, and even said that there was terra nullius. There wasn't even humans here, even though there was actually a nation of over 500 different nations of beautiful, peace-loving. Of course they have their spats and their wars and stuff, but they weren't anything like the aggression behind you English motherfuckers who came and invaded and killed and poisoned and diseased and destroyed this country. But how do we know what the fuck it looks like? We only know from images that were shown on the television. Captain Cook mapped it out like this, blah blah blah, mapped that bit out. They mapped it out to look like that, and so we assume it resembles a particular thing because we're so used to seeing it that way. So when we see it on a real and genuine flat earth map and it appears elongated, how would you know it's not that way anyway? You seriously don't. You know, I've known people who've driven backwards and forwards from the east coast to the west coast. It's usually, if you drive constantly, about a 3-day trip, which is a bloody long trip. If you take your time doing it, it should take you plenty of months doing it. But it doesn't mean that you know what it looks like because of maps you've been shown by other globalists who've conquered this world and destroyed native populations everywhere and diseased the whole bloody world with their bloody warmongering ways. And so you should accept the model of the map they show you as opposed to one that we think is possibly more realistic because this is how it appears to the best of our knowledge to be. Don't even talk to me about maps and how things look unless you yourself have been up high enough to see the entire nation, taken a picture, brought it down to scale and said, yeah, this is how it really is, because you don't know any more than any of us do about anything. All the maps you've ever seen were made by men, not by you personally.
One of the best arguments I had heard against flat earthers came from astrophysicist Dan Batcheldor. In order for the flat earth theory to be correct, it would not only involve a conspiracy of world governments and the airline industry and every nation's space program and the makers and operators of all the satellites, not only them, but it would also require a conspiracy within the flat earth movement itself. Because if you had one flat earther located in New York and another one located in Los Angeles, and you were to ask both of them about the current altitude of the sun, the flat earther in Los Angeles would essentially have to lie to the flat earther in New York for the numbers to match up.
Oh, come on. Now this is really stretching it. Not one scientist throughout the thousands of years of history has come to an equal conclusion of how high the sun is. For some it's 3 million miles, for some it's 93 million miles. At one stage it was over 100 million miles. And yet you think a flat earther looking for the truth can actually tell you how high the sun is from observing it? For fuck's sake. I put forth the proposition you don't even see the sun until its light reaches our atmosphere. Our atmosphere is a known fixed height above the ground level because of the properties of air density. Oxygen itself being the most heavy of gases, amongst the most heavier gases, pardon me, doesn't specifically go much more above, I don't know, what is it, 5,000, 10,000 feet, 30,000 feet? I'm sure once you reach 60,000 feet, you're going to have trouble breathing. I don't even know. I'm not even here to look up the height of Mount Everest just for the argument of this, but you need to take oxygen tanks up to climb one of our most highest known mountains, which is a geographical fixture on the ground. So if light itself doesn't even exist until it propagates due to the properties of atmospheric gases, then you'll never know how far away the source is. It may be like the stars, like it's said about the stars, that hundreds and billions of miles away. You wouldn't know any different. But you think that the size means nothing because you say that some of these stars are hundreds of billions of times bigger than the sun. So size and distance and all this shit, you can never know. So to think that an amateur flat earther, like most people waking up to the truth that we're not on a spinning ball, actually has any way whatsoever to measure the actual distance of the sun just by looking at it is the most retarded question I've ever heard. Don't ask retarded questions if you want to appear intelligent. No, it's not a worldwide conspiracy by all these people who are in on it. It's just people who are educated. Whenever you see the word educated in any quote whatsoever, substitute the word indoctrinated. You'll see, what was it? I think it was Neil deGrasse Tyson who said that the fact that there are many flat earthers in the world today is proof that our education system has failed. Now, when you replace the word education with indoctrination, that makes so much sense. Yes, it's failed. You couldn't indoctrinate us all. We're winning. We are winning in droves. And the reason is because we are truthers. We're not here to make up shit. We've got no agenda. We don't want you to believe we live on a flat earth because it makes us feel good about ourselves. I really don't care. If it's a globe, the evidence would stand up for itself. The fact the flat earth movement not only stands today, but it gets stronger and stronger and stronger is proof that we are intelligent beings who can see through the bullshit of your lies. And we're growing stronger and stronger every day, mark my words.
So even within the movement itself, the flat earth movement, it simply makes no sense.
See, that's just propaganda. That's exactly the sort of thing. Sorry. I shouldn't like songs.
Why do objects weigh 0.35% less at the equator than at the poles? This makes sense with centrifugal force on a spinning round globe, but not in a flat Earth model.
Way more. Prove it.
Now, before I go, I want to give a very special thank you to all of the other YouTubers who submitted questions and participated in this collaboration.
Let's try and go back and listen to this one.
Less at the equator than at the poles.
Oh, come on. We're going to have to listen to this last bit again.
It simply makes no sense.
Why do objects weigh 0.35% less at the equator than at the poles?
0.35% less at the equator than at the poles. Do things weigh 0.35% less at the equator than at the poles? What are you using as your standard here? According to the standard model, not only does centrifugal force get stronger at the equator, but the oblateness of your spheroid means it's actually bigger, which should be pushing you even harder, which means it should be way more than 0.35%. I would be thinking more like 3.5% would be the difference, considering you're spinning 1,040 miles per hour. Imagine you're on the end of a rope, swinging at 1,040 miles per hour, which is somewhat bigger down here than it is up there at the top. But at the top, you're not spinning at all. You're just pirouetting on your place. If centrifugal force is a real force, which I believe it is, you should be weighing next to nothing at the pole. You should be able to just float off. Oh, but no, there's still this attraction of mass sucking you down, trying to fling you off. Like, I've used this one years back as the idea of a soccer ball sitting in a field, slightly deflated, where a whole bunch of ants have gotten all over it, and a whole bunch of them have crawled in through the little air hole without deflating too much of the air. So this ball full of ants and covered with ants. If somebody comes along and kicks it and it goes spinning off across the field, what do you think's going to happen to all those ants on the outside? All of them are going to go flying off in all directions. The ones on the inside, they're going to get pinned to the inner surface, sort of resembling what gravity would do. Now, why would all the ants get flung off on the outside? Do you think the ones sitting on the top of the spin aren't going to get flung off because they're at the poles and they're going to weigh 0.35% less than the ants at the equator? They got flung off. These sort of questions, these sort of things, I will smash these day by day by day. And Wolfie, you're next in my firing line. I feel a little bit warmed up now. Talk to you all soon.